Welcome to the Trauma-Informed Culturally Competent Care in an Integrated Health Setting webinar presented by the American Psychological Association. Thank you for joining us. APA is delighted to bring you to this workshop, which is part of the Interprofessional CE Institute. First, a little housekeeping, so let's begin with those notes. At this time, all lines are muted. If you require technical support, please submit questions within the Tech Support tab on the right side of your screen, not to be confused with the Q&A tab. You should be able to see the slides live. If you experience technical issues, please try first refreshing your browser window. Second, try a different browser, such as Chrome or Firefox. If you're behind a corporate security wall that has not approved this website for access, please contact your technical support team. To view the slides in full screen mode, click the screen icon next to Live in the lower right side of the slide. Press Exit to exit the full screen. To access the PDF file of today's slides, scroll to the bottom of your screen and click on the link under the Handout section. During this webinar, our presenter will pose several polling questions. To record your answer to the poll question, please scroll to the Q&A tab and click your desired answer. You will only have a short moment to do so. Do not enter the answer into the Q&A box. You cannot see or answer polling questions in the full screen mode. We encourage you to submit questions about today's topic through the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen throughout the presentation. Questions will be answered during the last 15 minutes of the webinar. Due to time constraints, we will not be able to answer all questions. If you would like to rewatch this session, a recording will be available within 5 to 7 business days of the original air date. You will be able to access it from your course dashboard. For CE credits, to obtain the 2.5 APA continuing education credit offered in this webinar, you must click OK when you see the attendance verification box appear on your screen during this webinar. All you need to do is click OK. Remember to respond to all attendance verifications you see. You must also complete a webinar evaluation to stay online through the conclusion of the webinar, and you will see a pop-up here on your screen with access to the evaluation. A CE certificate will be emailed to you and will also be available for download in your course dashboard. If you have any questions about continuing education credit, please email cpe@apa.org. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Dr. Ferguson is a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma-informed care. Her research interests include culturally competent models of care to promote community engagement of diverse populations. She completed her doctorate at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. Dr. Ferguson is currently the staff psychologist for the Child Development Clinic in the Division of Developmental Pediatrics at the Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU. She also serves as the psychology faculty for the Virginia Leadership Education in Neurodevelopment Disabilities. Dr. Ferguson, I will now pass it over to you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar on trauma-informed culturally competent care in an integrated health setting. I would like to introduce my co-presenter for this webinar, who's Dr. Javi Garcia. Javi Garcia received her clinical psychology doctorate from Suffolk University in Boston. She specializes in providing therapy and assessment services to children, adolescents, and young adults. She has experience working with inpatient and outpatient populations within hospitals, community health centers, and integrated health settings. She strives to provide culturally sensitive and trauma-informed treatments to under-resourced populations. She recently completed a grant aimed at providing mental health services to undocumented families using an integrated health approach, and she currently works in a primary care setting. So welcome, Dr. Garcia. I want to start by discussing what we will cover in today's webinar. So our goal for the webinar is to tackle 4 main things. We would like to summarize the impact of trauma on brain and behavior. We're going to discuss disproportionate rates related to reporting trauma and substantiation with racially and linguistically diverse groups. We're going to have a conversation about cultural competence, approaches to assessment and interventions related to trauma. And we would lastly like to identify critiques of the current models of care and explain how integrated health settings can serve as a primary prevention setting for underrepresented groups. So I'm going to let Dr. Garcia take it from here.
Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to join Dr. Ferguson on this discussion. Just as a heads up, my camera's going in and out, so if I go out, you should still be able to hear me, and I'll join back on camera as soon as I can. But to start this presentation, I think it's important to go over some terms that you'll really be hearing throughout our talk. And the first is just simply defining what a traumatic event is. And according to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, a traumatic event is a frightening, dangerous, or violent event that poses a threat to a child's life or bodily integrity. I think it's important also to note that it doesn't have to directly happen to an individual for it to be considered a traumatic event. They can also witness something traumatic happening to someone that they care about or a close person to them. Traumatic events generally initiate a strong emotional and physical reaction that can persist long after the event, and it overwhelms an individual's capacity to cope with the stressor and also can elicit a lot of feelings of terror, powerlessness, and feelings of being out of control. Traumatic events, there's also the term that we'll use, traumatic stress, which is the idea that a person is exposed to multiple traumas over the course of their life. And this is different from a traumatic event because a traumatic event is one single episode, whereas traumatic stress, again, is multiple traumas over a period of time. And these traumatic stress generally leads to reactions that persist and affect daily lives throughout the course of someone's life. So in reactions to traumatic stress can include things like difficulties regulating their emotions, increase in risky behaviors, difficulty sleeping, attention and academic difficulties, as well as relationship difficulties. A child's traumatic stress response can have a profound impact on their perceptions of themselves, but also the world and their perceptions of the future. It really does impact a child, specifically their ability to trust others, their sense of personal safety, and effectiveness of navigating everyday stress. We have a video coming up that we found from the Center of Developing Child at Harvard, and this video will provide you with more details regarding the impact of traumatic stress specifically on child development. As you're watching this video, really pay close attention to how the video speaks about how traumatic stress can actually start affecting the way that people respond, specifically related to the way their brain is developing.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the